represent Britney Spears moving forward. All of this comes after Britney Spears' passionate speech in court 3 weeks ago. You may remember that. We covered it heavily here on the show. It raised questions about the intentions of her then lawyer, Samuel Ingram. Joining us now to discuss, criminal defense attorney and partner at Russo Gold, Florina Altshiler. Florina, thanks a lot. We do have a lot of developing news about this. So much more to discuss as we follow the case. Give us your sense here, your immediate reaction based off the announcement we do have and what this means in terms of having new legal representation in terms of the conservatorship itself. What does this actually mean?
It's super important in that it really opens the door to other conservatorships and people under conservatorships to be able to choose their own counsel, which is huge. Under the Sixth Amendment, of course, people are entitled to choose their own attorneys, but that applies to criminal cases and the due process that's afforded in criminal cases. This is not a criminal case, but the implications are huge, and this is a first where this has happened outside of a criminal case where someone's allowed to choose their own attorney versus having one appointed by the court, which is typically what happens in this type of a situation, a conservatorship.
So, Florina, a lot of people will look at this and say, okay, so what does this mean? Britney Spears' dad is no longer in the picture. Is Jamie Spears involved here? Is he still there? This just changes the legal representation. What changes and what does not change? I'll phrase it that way.
Sure. So instead of having an attorney appointed by the court that was her conservatorship attorney for the past 13 years, now she has an attorney that she chose herself that's going to be representing her. And that attorney is going to be arguing to end the conservatorship. It may well be a long road ahead to have this conservatorship ended, but this is a huge step in the right direction because she's afforded the ability to make the choice, to make an informed decision, which is something that she was not allowed to do for the past 13 years.
Britney Spears also telling the judge here that she would like to see her own father, Jamie Spears, perhaps in the minds of fans at least, villain number one of this entire saga, right? She told the judge she would like to have her own father charged with conservatorship abuse. Is anything like this even legally possible?
You know, I'm not aware of him specifically doing anything that's necessarily illegal. I think the issue is really one of what our legal system allows conservatorships to do, right? What he was doing was controlling her life, but with a judicial approval. The court gave him that ability to do that. The court gave him the ability to make choices for her, to tell her that she can't remove her IUD, to decide how to spend her money, on what and when and where and how, to give her an allowance, while, you know, giving himself however much money he was paying himself as part of this conservatorship. Those are not necessarily fraudulent things. Those are things that are allowed to happen in a conservatorship. The issue is with the conservatorship, and the real issue really for American society and for the legal system is, why do we allow these conservatorships to go on in our system? People live with disabilities all the time. But they don't become, you know, under a conservatorship where their every single day's decision is made by somebody else. They deserve an opportunity, despite whatever disability they may have, to make their own informed decisions, especially if they are cognitively able.
Congress is paying attention to this issue, and it's not a partisan issue. There aren't many things I could say that for. Democrats and Republicans, we heard Matt Gaetz out there talking to the crowd. He had a few choice words for Britney Spears' father that I cannot repeat here on air, but that was Matt Gaetz' approach. Congressman Jason Smith is a Republican in the House from Missouri. He just introduced a bill. He said this, quote, "No woman should be forced to have an IUD without her consent. Congress can and should put a stop to this terrible practice." Will it and can it take an act of Congress, or in your estimation, through the lens of legality in the courts, in a case like this, is this the state of California that has far too much sway to sort of oversee or supersede what even the federal government can do? Because I know it gets thorny once you get into the debate of federalism here.
Sure, absolutely. There's federal law and there's state law, and different states can do what they want, but there's going to be an overarching rule by federal law. Marijuana is a great example, abortion's a great example, right? There's federal Supreme Court decisions and federal legislation that makes decisions that will affect things, but then the states can also make their own decisions. So federally, marijuana is still illegal, but if you're in Colorado, it's cool. So, the states can make their own decisions based on legislation as to what they deem appropriate or not. And then the federal government affects things that affect interstate commerce or, things that have national significance. So here, in terms of conservatorship laws and rules, the federal government can absolutely pass legislation that prohibits certain things from happening, that puts stricter rules on how these conservatorships are monitored, how they're reviewed, right? The only reason this is becoming national news now, 13 years later, is because this is the first time Britney Spears spoke up to say, hey, I want to stop this. And the only reason she spoke up 13 years later to say, hey, I want to stop this is because she had no idea that she could. She had no idea that she could question the conservatorship. And so maybe if there was a reevaluation or reassessment every year, every couple of years, is this still necessary? Is this something that we should force upon somebody? What is their mental status? Do they need this conservatorship or have they improved? Unfortunately, the reality is this really is an exceptional case with a young person who's experienced massive stardom and wealth. And so it sounds crazy that she's under a conservatorship in this atypical case where she has all this money and she's working and performing. Normally, and how this conservatorship law started is you have somebody who's like in their 90s or they're in a vegetative state. They very clearly are not capable of doing anything for themselves. They have severe Alzheimer's. And so there's no reevaluating every year. They're only going to get worse. They're not improving.
Of course, and as we covered on our show a couple weeks ago, the court of public opinion here has completely swelled this story with the help of reporting and a must-watch documentary on this issue. I hope you will rejoin us because we're going to continue to have this conversation. It's really important to a lot of people, and the law is front and center. Florina Altshiler, thanks a lot for being here. Great to have you.